The rain was coming down in sheets when Marcus Chen pressed the doorbell, water dripping from his jacket onto the pristine welcome mat that read, "The Harrison Home." He shouldn't be here. He knew that. His best friend Jake was 3,000 miles away in Seattle for a business trip, and Marcus had promised himself he would never, ever cross this line. But when her text came through at 11:30 at night, "I need help. Please." He didn't think. He just drove. And now, standing on this porch where he'd spent countless summer afternoons as a teenager, he was about to make either the best decision of his life or the worst mistake he'd ever regret. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Caroline Harrison, 44 years old, with honey blonde hair pulled into a messy bun and those striking blue eyes that had haunted his dreams since he was 17. She was wearing a simple white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, no makeup, and she looked like she'd been crying. She also looked more beautiful than any woman had a right to look at nearly midnight on a Thursday. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice catching. "You shouldn't be here." But she didn't close the door. She didn't step back. And when her eyes met his, something passed between them, something electric, something terrifying, something that had been building for 12 long years. "Your text said you needed help," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm here." She laughed, but it was hollow, broken. "I shouldn't have sent that. I wasn't thinking. She pressed her fingers to her temples, shaking her head. "God, this is such a mess. Everything is such a mess. Caroline." He said her name like a prayer, like a warning, like a promise. "Let me in." She looked at him for a long moment, rain still pounding the roof above them, wind whipping through the trees. And then she stepped aside. What happened next would change everything. But before I tell you about that, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to when Marcus Chen was just a 16-year-old kid from the wrong side of town who had no business becoming best friends with the golden boy of Westbrook Academy. Marcus had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment above his grandmother's Chinese restaurant in downtown Portland. His father had left before he was born, and his mother worked double shifts as a nurse to make ends meet. He'd gotten into Westbrook on a scholarship, full ride, academic excellence, the whole package. But scholarships didn't buy you the right clothes, the right car, or the right attitude. They didn't make you belong. Jake Harrison had been everything Marcus wasn't. Wealthy, confident, effortlessly charming. The kind of guy who walked into a room and owned it without trying. Marcus had expected to hate him. Everyone else with money had looked at Marcus like he was something they'd scraped off their shoe. But Jake was different. On Marcus's first day at Westbrook, when some senior was giving him grief about his second-hand blazer, Jake had stepped in. Not with fists, Jake wasn't a fighter, but with that easy smile and a casual, "Hey, Chen, you coming to help me with the calc homework or what? I'm completely lost without you, man." There was no calc homework. They both knew it. But Jake had given Marcus an out, a way to walk away with his dignity intact. And from that moment on, they were inseparable. If you're already feeling this story, drop a like right now. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for what comes next. The first time Marcus saw Caroline Harrison, he forgot how to breathe. He was 16, awkward in that way teenage boys are, all gangly limbs and uncertain posture. Jake had invited him over to work on a history project, and Caroline had answered the door in a yellow sundress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, a glass of lemonade in her hand. "You must be Marcus," she'd said, her smile warm and genuine. "Jake talks about you all the time. Come in, come in. Are you hungry? I just made cookies." She was 32 years old. A full 16 years older than him. Married, happily, from what he could tell, to Jake's father Richard, a corporate attorney who worked long hours but adored his family. She volunteered at the local library, organized charity events, baked cookies from scratch. She was the epitome of the perfect suburban mom. And Marcus was absolutely, hopelessly, devastatingly in love with her. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was impossible. He told himself it was just a crush, something hormonal and stupid that he'd grow out of. But years passed, and the feeling never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, deeper, more complex. He learned her laugh, her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. He memorized the curve of her smile, the exact shade of blue in her eyes, the way she always smelled faintly of vanilla and something floral. He never said anything. He never even hinted. Because Jake was his best friend, his brother in everything but blood. And because Caroline was married, off-limits, existing in a world he could never touch. So Marcus did what he'd always done, he pushed his feelings down, locked them away, and focused on being the best friend Jake deserved. They went to different colleges, Jake to Stanford, Marcus to MIT on another scholarship, but they stayed close. Phone calls every week, visits during holidays, the kind of friendship that distance couldn't weaken. Marcus threw himself into his studies, graduated top of his class, landed a job at a tech startup that eventually sold for millions. By 28, he was wealthy in his own right, successful beyond his wildest dreams. But he never stopped thinking about her. Richard Harrison died when Marcus was 25. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. Marcus flew back to Portland for the funeral, stood next to Jake as he mourned his father, and watched Caroline try to hold herself together for her son's sake. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in her black dress, her blue eyes rimmed with red. At the reception afterward, Marcus found her alone in the kitchen, staring out the window at the backyard where Jake had grown up. "Mrs. Harrison," he'd said softly. "I'm so sorry." She'd turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time in years. He wasn't a gangly teenager anymore. He'd grown into his frame, filled out with muscle, carried himself with the confidence that success brings. But when she looked at him, he felt 16 again. "Caroline," she'd said. "You're not a kid anymore, Marcus. You can call me Caroline." Something had shifted in that moment. Something small but significant, like the first crack in a dam. Now, back in the present, 3 years after Richard's death, Marcus stood in Caroline's living room as she closed the door behind him. The house was different than he remembered, quieter, emptier. Jake's childhood photos still lined the walls, but there was a sadness to the place now, a sense of something missing. "What happened?" Marcus asked, watching as Caroline moved to the couch and sat down heavily. "Your text scared me." She laughed again, that hollow sound. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, I was weak. I had a moment of weakness and I reached out to you because," she stopped, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. "Richard's brother is contesting the will. He's claiming that Richard wasn't in his right mind when he made his final decisions, that I manipulated him somehow. He's trying to take everything. The house, the investments, everything Richard worked for." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "I got the legal papers today. I've been fighting this for months, Marcus, and I'm so tired. I'm so goddamn tired." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. He'd met Richard's brother, Gerald, at the funeral. A cold, calculating man who'd never approved of Caroline, who'd made snide comments about how Richard had married down when he chose a woman from a working-class family instead of someone from their social circle. "Does Jake know?" Marcus asked. "I didn't want to worry him. He's got his own problems with the new company, and he's so far away, and," she broke off, her voice cracking. "I just needed someone. I needed." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus heard what she wasn't saying. She needed him. He crossed the room and sat down next to her on the couch, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. "Not yet. I'm here," he said simply. Whatever you need, Caroline. I'm here. She turned to look at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain continued to pound against the windows, thunder rolling in the distance. And then, slowly, she reached out and touched his face. "Why did you come?" she whispered. "It's almost midnight. You drove 45 minutes in a storm." Why? Marcus could have lied. He could have said he was just being a good friend, that he was worried about her, that he would have done the same for anyone. But he was 28 years old, and he was tired of lying. Tired of pretending. Tired of locking away the one thing he'd never been able to forget. "You know why," he said quietly. The air between them changed, charged with something dangerous and inevitable. "Marcus," she started. "I've been in love with you since I was 16 years old," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I've loved you through high school, through college, through every relationship I've tried to make work because I was trying to get over you. But I can't. I've tried, Caroline. God, I've tried. But you're in my head, in my heart, in every single dream I've ever had about the future. And I know it's wrong. I know you're my best friend's mother. I know there are 1,000 reasons why I should never have said any of this. But I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of lying to you. And when you texted me tonight, I knew I would walk through fire to get to you." Caroline stared at him, her eyes wide, her hand still resting on his cheek. He could see the war playing out across her face, desire and fear, hope and guilt, all tangled together. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. But she didn't move away. "I know. This can't happen. I know. Jake would never forgive us. I know." His voice was rough, strained. "Tell me to leave, Caroline. Tell me to go, and I'll go. I'll walk out that door and we'll never speak of this again. But you have to say it. You have to mean it." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. And then, so softly he almost didn't hear it, she said, "I can't." Before either of them could think better of it, before logic could intervene, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, uncertain. 12 years of longing crystallized in that single moment of contact. Marcus's hand came up to cup her face, gentle, reverent, treating her like something precious. And then the uncertainty melted away, replaced by hunger, by need, by all the things they'd both been denying for so long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caroline's eyes were filled with tears. "This is wrong," she said, but her fingers were curled in his shirt, holding him close. "I know. I'm 44 years old. You're 28. I'm your best friend's mother. I know. People will talk. They'll say terrible things. About me, about you, about—" Marcus kissed her again, silencing her protests. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't care what people say," he murmured. "I've spent 12 years caring about what I was supposed to feel, who I was supposed to want. I'm done. You're the only thing I've ever been sure of, Caroline. The only thing that's ever felt completely right." She closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But we're going to figure it out. Together." That night, they talked until dawn. They sat on the couch as the storm raged outside, and they laid bare all the secrets they'd been keeping. Caroline confessed that she'd noticed the way Marcus looked at her when he was younger, that she'd felt guilty for feeling flattered by it. She told him about her marriage to Richard, how it had been good but never passionate, how she'd loved him but had never felt consumed by him the way she felt in this moment. Marcus told her about every failed relationship, every woman he'd dated while trying to convince himself he was over her. He told her about the nights he'd lain awake thinking about her, hating himself for wanting what he couldn't have. He told her about the moment at Richard's funeral when she'd asked him to call her Caroline, and how it had cracked something open inside him that he'd never been able to close again. They didn't sleep together that night. It felt important to wait, to make sure this was real and not just the product of emotional vulnerability. But they kissed, long and slow, and when the sun finally rose, they watched it together through the rain-streaked windows. "What about Jake?" Caroline asked, her head resting on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus sighed. "I'll tell him. He deserves to hear it from me. He might hate us." "He might," Marcus agreed. "But I'd rather lose his friendship honestly than keep it through lies. He's the best friend I've ever had. He deserves the truth." Caroline was quiet for a moment. "You really would give that up? For me?" Marcus turned to look at her, this woman who had occupied so much space in his heart for so long. "I'd give up anything for you. I know that sounds crazy. I know we've barely begun whatever this is. But I've loved you for 12 years, Caroline. That's not going to change. If this story is hitting you right in the feels, go ahead and drop a comment below telling me your thoughts. I read every single one, and your support means more than you know." The next few weeks were a strange, wonderful limbo. Marcus visited whenever he could, helping Caroline deal with the legal battle against Gerald. He connected her with one of the best estate attorneys in Portland, a woman named Patricia Vance who had a reputation for destroying opposing counsel in probate cases. They built their case carefully, gathering evidence that Richard's will had been made when he was fully competent and that Gerald's claims were nothing more than greed disguised as concern. During the days, they were focused and professional. But at night, when the legal documents were put away and the world grew quiet, they learned each other in ways that had nothing to do with court cases. Caroline discovered that Marcus made the best dumplings she'd ever tasted, a recipe passed down from his grandmother. Marcus learned that Caroline had once dreamed of being a painter, that she had a hidden collection of canvases in the attic that she'd never shown anyone, not even Richard. They talked about books and movies and the meaning of life. They argued about politics and made up by slow dancing in the kitchen to old jazz records. And they fell deeper in love with every passing day. But the shadow of Jake loomed over everything. He called regularly, and both Caroline and Marcus had to pretend that nothing had changed. The guilt gnawed at Marcus, eating away at the happiness he'd finally found. "I'm going to tell him," Marcus said one evening, after a particularly difficult phone call where Jake had joked about visiting and the three of them going to dinner together. "This weekend. He's flying home for some meetings anyway. I'll tell him in person." Caroline's face was pale. "Are you sure?" "No," Marcus admitted. "I'm terrified. But I can't keep lying to him. He's going to find out eventually, and it'll be worse if he hears it from someone else." "He'll hate me," Caroline whispered. "His own mother." Marcus took her hands in his. "He might be angry. He'll definitely be hurt. But Jake loves you. You're his mom. That's not going to change. What about you? What about your friendship?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. The truth was, he didn't know. Jake might forgive him eventually, or he might not. The friendship that had defined so much of Marcus's life might be over forever. But when he looked at Caroline, when he saw the fear and hope mingled in her eyes, he knew there was only one choice. "Whatever happens with Jake, I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "We're in this together." The weekend arrived too quickly. Jake's flight landed at noon on Saturday, and Marcus had arranged to meet him at a coffee shop near the airport. Neutral ground. Jake looked good, tanned from Seattle's rare sunshine, successful in his tailored jacket, happy in a way that made Marcus's guilt twist even sharper. They hugged like brothers, the way they always had. "Man, it's good to see you," Jake said, grinning. "Seattle's great, but nothing beats having my main man around." How's everything? How's business? Business is good. Marcus forced a smile. But Jake, there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Jake's expression shifted, his smile fading slightly. What's wrong? You look like someone died. No one died. But, Marcus took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would change everything. I'm in love with your mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stared at him, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked horribly like betrayal. What? His voice was flat, dangerous. I know how it sounds. I know it's. You're in love with my mother. Jake repeated the words slowly, as if trying to make sense of them. My mother. Caroline. The woman who raised me. Yes. How long? Marcus closed his eyes. Since I was 16. Jake stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped against the floor, drawing looks from other customers. His hands were shaking, his face pale with shock. 12 years, he said. You've been in love with my mom for 12 years. Every time you came to my house, every holiday, every birthday, you were looking at her. Wanting her. Jake. Does she know? Does she? Jake's voice cracked. Are you together? Yes. There was no point in lying now. We've been together for about 3 weeks. The sound Jake made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. I thought you were my brother, he said, his voice barely audible. My brother, Marcus. The one person I trusted more than anyone in the world. And you've been, all this time. I never acted on it when I was younger. I never would have. But after your father died, things changed. We changed. I didn't plan this, Jake. I didn't want this. But I love her. I love her, and I couldn't keep lying to you. Jake turned back, and there were tears in his eyes, tears of anger and hurt and something that looked devastatingly like grief. Get out of my sight, he said quietly. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't contact my mother. Just, get away from me. Jake, please. I said get out. The entire coffee shop went silent. Marcus stood there, feeling his world crumble around him, feeling the weight of the choice he'd made. And then, slowly, he nodded. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. He walked out of the coffee shop, into the bright afternoon sunshine, and felt like he was dying. The days that followed were the hardest of Marcus's life. Jake went straight to Caroline's house after their confrontation, and Marcus could only imagine how that conversation went. He waited by his phone, desperate for any news, but none came. 3 days passed. Then 4. On the 5th day, just when Marcus was convinced he'd lost everything, Caroline called. He's gone back to Seattle, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. He's angry. He said terrible things. But Marcus, he didn't completely shut the door. What do you mean? He said he needs time. That he can't process this right now, but he's not. He didn't say he never wants to see us again. He just needs time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was a sliver of hope, and Marcus clung to it desperately. Are you okay? He asked. No, Caroline admitted. But I will be. Are you coming over? I wasn't sure you'd want me to. After everything. Marcus. Her voice was firm. This is exactly when I need you. Don't make me face this alone. He was at her door within 30 minutes. The legal battle with Gerald came to a head 3 weeks later. Patricia Vance had done her job brilliantly, unearthing evidence that Gerald himself had tried to pressure Richard into changing his will years ago, which completely undermined his claims about Caroline's supposed manipulation. The judge ruled decisively in Caroline's favor, and Gerald was ordered to pay legal fees on top of his embarrassing public defeat. Caroline cried when they left the courthouse, tears of relief and exhaustion and long overdue vindication. "It's over," she said, clutching Marcus's hand. "It's finally over." "The legal stuff is," Marcus agreed. "But what about us? What about the future?" She looked at him, this brilliant, beautiful woman who had become his entire world. "What do you want for the future?" "Everything," he said honestly. "I want everything with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to argue about where to go for dinner and make up in the kitchen. I want to build a life together, a real life, whatever that looks like. I know there are obstacles. I know people will judge us. But I don't care. I love you, Caroline Harrison, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. "That sounds like a proposal." "Maybe it is. We've been together for 2 months. I've loved you for 12 years. I think I've done my waiting." She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "Ask me properly, then." Marcus dropped to one knee, right there on the courthouse steps, and pulled out a ring he'd been carrying for 2 weeks, a simple diamond on a white gold band, elegant and understated, just like her. "Caroline Harrison, will you marry me?" She looked at him, at the ring, at the curious passers-by who had stopped to watch this unexpected scene. And then she pulled him to his feet and kissed him soundly. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, yes, yes. If you've made it this far, you're officially family. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next, and leave a comment with a heart emoji if you believe in love that defies all expectations." The news of their engagement spread quickly, and the reactions were mixed. Caroline's friends were divided. Some were supportive, celebrating her newfound happiness after years of widowhood, while others pulled away, uncomfortable with the age difference and the circumstances. Marcus's family was easier. His mother had always liked Caroline and was simply happy her son had finally found someone who made him smile like that. And then there was Jake. 6 weeks after their confrontation, Marcus received a text, "I'm coming to Portland this weekend. We should talk." The meeting was arranged at Caroline's house, neutral ground, in a way, since it was where all 3 of them had history. Marcus arrived first, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Relax," Caroline said, taking his hand. "Whatever he says, we'll face it together." When Jake walked through the door, he looked different. Older, somehow. More tired. But there was something in his eyes that wasn't pure anger anymore, something more complicated. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Jake sighed and sat down on the armchair across from them. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said slowly. "A lot of therapy, actually. Turns out, finding out your best friend is in love with your mom really messes with your head." "Who knew?" "Jake," Marcus started. "Let me finish." Jake held up his hand. "I was angry. I was hurt. I felt betrayed. And honestly, part of me still feels all those things. But I also realized something." He looked at his mother, really looked at her. "You've been happy these past few months. Happier than I've seen you in years, maybe ever. Even when Dad was alive, there was always something sad about you, something unfulfilled. I never understood it until now." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "I loved your father. I know you did. But love isn't always the same thing as happiness. And when I look at you with Marcus, when I see the way you light up around him," Jake's voice cracked. "I want that for you, Mom. I want you to be happy." "What about us?" Marcus asked quietly. "Our friendship?" Jake was silent for a long moment. I don't know if things can ever be the same between us. I need more time to process everything. But I don't want to lose you entirely, Marcus. You've been my brother for almost 15 years. That has to count for something. It wasn't the complete reconciliation Marcus had hoped for, but it was more than he'd dared to expect. He felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of fear and guilt that had been tightening for months. "Thank you," he said. "That's all I can ask for." Jake nodded, then stood up. "I should go. I need some time alone, I think." "But Mom," he crossed the room and hugged Caroline tightly. "Congratulations. I mean it." When he left, Caroline collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing with relief. "He's going to be okay," she whispered. "We're all going to be okay." Marcus held her close and allowed himself, for the first time, to truly believe it. They got married on a spring afternoon, in the backyard of the house where Marcus had first fallen in love with her 12 years ago. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family, with Patricia Vance as a surprise guest who had become a genuine friend during the legal battle. Marcus's grandmother was there, beaming with pride, having declared Caroline a good woman with strong chi. And Jake was there too. He walked his mother down the aisle, and when the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, he said clearly, "I do. And I give her with love and hope for a beautiful future." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Marcus's vows were simple but profound. "Caroline, I've loved you since I was a boy, but I fell in love with you as a man. You've taught me that love doesn't follow rules or timelines, that the heart knows what it wants even when the mind can't understand it. I promise to spend every day of our lives making you glad you took a chance on me. I promise to love you fiercely, to support you endlessly, and to dance with you in the kitchen whenever jazz music plays." Caroline's response made everyone laugh through their tears. "Marcus, you came into my life when I wasn't looking for anything and gave me everything I didn't know I needed. I promise to always make too many cookies, to never let you win at Scrabble, and to spend the rest of my days loving you with my whole heart, even when you leave your socks on the bathroom floor." When they kissed as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. The years that followed were not without challenges. The age difference meant facing uncomfortable assumptions and occasional cruel remarks. There were family gatherings where tensions ran high and moments when old hurts resurfaced. Marcus and Jake's friendship healed slowly, carefully, like a broken bone that was knitting back together, not quite the same as before, but stronger in different ways. Caroline returned to painting, her hidden talent finally given room to flourish. Her work began showing in local galleries, then regional ones, then a few notable national exhibitions. Marcus supported every opening, every late night of creative frustration, every moment of self-doubt. And she supported him through the stresses of his career, through the anxiety attacks he'd never told anyone about, through the grief when his grandmother passed away and he felt untethered from his childhood. They built a life together, messy, complicated, beautiful. They adopted 2 cats named after jazz musicians, Ella and Duke. They traveled to Paris and Tokyo and a tiny village in Portugal where they got lost for hours and found the best seafood restaurant either of them had ever experienced. They had fights that felt world-ending and reconciliations that felt like coming home. And through it all, their love never wavered. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jake pulled Marcus aside at the celebration dinner. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Marcus frowned. "For what?" "For taking so long to accept this. For making you feel guilty about loving my mom. I watched you two together tonight, and I realized something: you're not the villain in my mom's story. You're the hero. You made her happy in a way I'd never seen before. And I was too caught up in my own hurt to appreciate that." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You don't owe me anything, Jake. Your reaction was completely understandable. Maybe. But I want you to know, I'm glad. I'm glad she found you. I'm glad you had the courage to tell her how you felt. And I'm glad you're my stepfather, weird as that is to say. Marcus laughed, wiping his eyes. I think brother still works better. Jake grinned. Yeah, probably. Brother it is. They hugged, and years of lingering awkwardness finally dissolved. Now, sitting on the porch of the beach house they'd rented for their 10th anniversary, Marcus watched Caroline painting the sunset over the ocean. Her hair had more silver in it now, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But to him, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. You're staring, she said without turning around. I'm admiring. She laughed, that sound he'd loved since he was 16 years old. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously in love with you. She set down her brush and came to sit beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder. I was thinking about the night you showed up on my porch. When I said you shouldn't be there. But your lips said otherwise, Marcus finished, smiling. The best decision I ever made. Opening that door. Taking a chance on something that seemed impossible. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I've never once regretted it. Not for a single second. Even with all the judgment. All the obstacles. Especially with all of that. It made us stronger. It made us certain. Caroline tilted her face up to look at him, her blue eyes shining in the golden light of sunset. I love you, Marcus Chen. I love you too, Caroline Chen. She laughed. Still getting used to that name. You've got the rest of our lives to adjust. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Marcus realized that every moment of longing, every year of waiting, every ounce of pain he'd endured to get here, it had all been worth it. Because love, real love, doesn't care about age or circumstance or what society thinks is appropriate. Love finds a way. It always finds a way. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in love today. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love knowing that our community spans the entire globe, united by stories that remind us what it means to be human. Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? We're all just people, stumbling through life, hoping to find someone who makes the journey worthwhile. Someone who looks at us and sees not what we are, but who we could be. Someone who takes our hand and says, whatever happens, we face it together. That's what Marcus found in Caroline. That's what Caroline found in Marcus. Not a perfect love story, but a real one, messy and complicated and absolutely, undeniably worth every single moment. So here's my question for you, what's stopping you from taking your chance? What door are you afraid to open? What words are you scared to say? Maybe today is the day you find the courage. Maybe today is the day everything changes. Because you deserve love. Real love. The kind that makes you feel alive. And trust me, it's out there waiting for you. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it.